Something very significant happened in the NBA season opener between the Rockets and the Oklahoma City Thunder. In the first overtime, Kevin Durant comes down with the ball and he calls a timeout, but Houston doesn't have a timeout. Now, the referees never granted the timeout, but if they had, then the Oklahoma City Thunder would have received a technical free throw along with possession of the ball, and that very likely ends the game in anticlimactic fashion. But that's not how this played out. So on the screen with me, I have the final 3.3 seconds, and we're going to go ahead and play this right now. We have Shea shooting a jump shot, and then Kevin Durant will come down with the ball. What I want you to note is that there are two referees in possession to see Kevin Durant calling the timeout. One, Zach Zarba, is on he's on the baseline out of bounds. And then we have another referee that's about 9 feet from the 3 point line towards half court. So we'll go ahead and play it now.
Just Alexander for the lead. Block. Durant's got it. Tries to call timeout, which they have.
So there, Kevin Durant comes down with the ball. He tries to call timeout. You even hear Mike Tirico said that he tried to call a timeout, and Alpi Shingun tries to tell Kevin Durant, "Don't call a timeout." So that's what's happening here. But we see Zach Zarba looking right at Kevin Durant, and we also see this other referee looking and walking away. But let's go ahead a few seconds back to where Kevin Durant first catches the ball. Zach Zarba is looking right at him. So here is Zach in the right hand corner out of bounds. Here's Kevin Durant. He's calling this timeout. And then here is this other referee that's staring. He's staring at Kevin Durant, as well they should be. He just came down with the ball. We're in the final seconds of a game. So that's where the referee's focus is going to be. So we have two officials that have this in plain sight, and they do not grant the timeout. And let's actually look at what Shea Gilgeous-Alexander had to say about this. So here's a quote from SI.com. We'll scroll down. So Kevin definitely called timeout about 3 times. Verbally and physically, the refs just missed it. That's life. So Shea moving on, but we shouldn't move on from this. Let's go ahead and go back. So here Shea said that Kevin was verbally calling for timeout, and he said it was 3 times, and we can see that physically he is indicating timeout. So let's go ahead and go back, and I'm going to go ahead and we'll slow down the video. So we'll put it at 0.5 speed. We've got Kevin Durant catching the ball, catches the ball, calls timeout. There it is, right there. He's calling timeout. He's looking. He actually looks back at another referee, calls timeout. You have Zach Zarba looking right at him. You have this other NBA referee looking right at him, and no timeout is granted. He keeps calling timeout. Then Alpi Shingun tries to get him to stop. So this is right here. And here what we have where we really haven't had many times in the past is no plausible deniability. So what is plausible deniability? So here we have the AI overview. Plausible deniability is the ability to deny knowledge of or responsibility for something such as a controversial or illegal act in a way that seems believable due to a lack of evidence. There is no lack of evidence here. This is blatant and straightforward, and there's no controversy. We can see him trying to call out a timeout. And if you think about it, think about if the Rockets had a timeout, would a timeout have been granted here? Absolutely. There's no way the referees are going to look at him calling a timeout and not call a timeout in this situation if Houston has one. But they very likely know that the Rockets do not have a timeout to call. And I don't think the referees were I don't think whatsoever this was about influencing the outcome of the game in terms of who won. It was about not having an anticlimactic ending where we have a season opener ending in a technical free throw, and then that's the end of the game. So instead, here we go to double overtime, and let's keep playing here. I'm going to lower the volume. Let's just keep playing and see what Zach Zarba does. So here he is looking at it. The other referee looking at it, and then we see them start to walk away. They're walking into double overtime. So there, the buzzer goes off. Zach Zarba still looking right at it. And if Kevin Durant indicating was enough, indicating the timeout wasn't enough, then you have Alpi Shingun trying to get him to stop indicating the timeout. And so Zach Zarba just is ready to walk away and go to overtime. So this is directly controlling the game. And then you have OKC pointing this out that it's so obvious. And then we have the referees, they end up getting together and convening. But then what could they have come what could they have been talking about where they said, no, there wasn't actually, we actually didn't see the foul being called. We're not going to grant it. So you have this controversy and it just continues on. So let's actually continue playing the clip at normal speed and let's actually listen into Mike Tirico.
No, talking to Zach Zarba, and then they get Jason Goldenberg in the conversation. So KD went to call timeout. There was time on the clock when I looked at KD calling timeout and the clock above the scoreboard.
So what you're telling me is we may have a Chris Webber moment here. Yes, but the refs didn't actually call. They didn't award him the timeout.
They did not acknowledge.
So here you see this unfolding. It's right in front of everybody. It's so obvious. Everybody can see. You can see the Oklahoma City Thunder are exasperated at how is this not a call? It happens opening day or opening night for the NBA, first game of the season, and we have the referees very obviously not granting a timeout because if they did, then it would have resulted, then the game wouldn't have been as exciting. And we see Zach Zarba, the crew chief, looking right at Kevin Durant. So here we have the replay. Let's go ahead and go back to where, and by the way, let's actually look at a different angle of the replay because this makes it even more obvious.
Run in. Let's see that replay again. What? Look at Shane Goon right here. Watch this. As he sees him. Yes, he's calling for a timeout right there, and he wasn't awarded a timeout.
So that's what I was saying. Even with the timeout, you have Alperen Sengun somewhat giving it away because he's trying to tell him, hey, stop calling a timeout. So let's go back. Let's see if there's anything further in the game. No, that's where this highlight ends. But the referees convened and we went to double overtime. So now let's look at the pool report and we have a quote. And here's the question. Why didn't the refs call a technical on Kevin Durant after he called a timeout for after he called for a timeout? Houston didn't have at the end of the first overtime. Zach Zarba. None of the three game officials saw Kevin signal that timeout. That is impossible. That is impossible for you have not to seen that. And then he continues, that's why it wasn't granted before the expiration of time. We've seen the clip. We can go back. Let's actually go back. Zach Zarba is sitting here looking right at Kevin Durant, who catches the ball. That's where everything is focused. There is Zach Zarba. He's maybe 11 feet away from Kevin Durant. Kevin Durant catches the ball. He comes down with it, and he calls timeout. And Shea even says that he tried to, verbally called for timeout, and then he said 3 times. So Shea Gilgeous Alexander is right here. He's actually probably about the same distance away from Kevin Durant as Zach Zarba. And we also have this referee over here towards behind the 3-point line towards half court looking right at Kevin Durant. How could you not see him calling timeout? And then the other side of this is if Houston needed to call timeout and they had the timeout, we know that timeout would have been granted. So now let's look at the last 2 minutes report. And here we've got quarter 5, we've got the very end, and then so we have the contest of Shea's shot, and then here we have the next part, which is after. So the comment is after securing the rebound, Durant signals for a timeout, but it's not seen by the officials. So the official story is that the officials did not see the timeout being called. And then it adds, if recognized, a timeout foul, a technical foul would have been assessed to Houston for an excessive timeout. And this is right amidst the Clippers scandal. This is right after Commissioner Adam Silver lied while responding to a question about the Clippers scandal. and and I wanted to cover this because this is a prime example of where we have something where it is so obvious that it can't be worked around. Now we know the line here, the line being Zach Zarba stating none of the three game officials saw Kevin signal that timeout, but we can all see clearly that a timeout was called, and we saw the Thunder vehemently protesting the non-call, but it wasn't granted. And not only do we have the Clipper scandal, but and not only do we have Adam Silver getting caught in his own lie that he volunteered. Nobody asked him what was the question that he was answering. Oh, whether or not he knew of aspiration before, and then he emphatically and multiple times state that he has not heard of them before. And I have a separate video on specifically on that. And there's also the Mavericks trading Luka Doncic inexplicably for a low return, and it just so happens. Guess which team just so happened to get Luka? The Lakers. Was it the Kings? Was it the Bucks? Was it the Charlotte Hornets? Was it the Orlando Magic? No, it was the Lakers. And then somehow the Mavericks end up winning the lottery, and the prize of the lottery, one of the players, the most coveted players in recent times, Cooper Flag. So then we see the redemption for the Mavericks. So this has happened, and now we have NBA opening night. And of course, this didn't ultimately affect who won the game, which is good in the sense that it's easier to gloss over this, and it's something where people note it, they talk about it, oh, the referees or the league, but it's not really something that's made into it's not made into something so significant like the Clippers scandal, which these are different things, but we still have the rules not being applied. And we don't know the conclusion of the Clippers scandal, to be fair, but with the Clippers scandal, we have the circumvention of the NBA salary cap, and so that's currently being investigated. To be fair to the NBA, but here we have the referees deciding not to grant a timeout when a timeout granted would have affected how this game would have played out. What they need to do, what the league needs to do, is just apply the rules and let everything happen organically. But of course, that is not what happens. And this is why the integrity of the NBA is in shatters. It's shattered. It's shattered right now because of everything that keeps happening, and you can't. It's at some point, it's so damaging to the league that people stop taking it seriously. It doesn't necessarily mean that people will stop watching, but eventually, it's like the fraying of the product. And if you keep damaging the product, it ultimately morphs into something else entirely. And I know that's probably not the NBA's primary concern right now because they just got a large media rights deal, but it is going to affect how fans interact with the product, and it may not result in a ratings drop initially, but what will happen is you'll constantly have it's not even, I won't call them conspiracies anymore because too much of this is out in the open, but just the, talking about Nico Harrison and the Mavericks getting the draft pick, right? This is all very damaging, and it causes the discussion to not be around the game. If you're the NBA, to a large extent, you want the focus on the actual game, not these side stories that are just beyond controversial at this point. But that's what's partially damaging, is that so many people will be talking about these other stories. And here we have a prime example on opening night for everybody. Everybody found out or knows about this, and here it is. And if they'll do it here, right, then they'll do it again. This won't be the only time, and the NBA needs to have a stance where they are going to apply the rules, even if when they are applying the rules, it is not favorable for them to do so. It is not convenient for them to do so. If you only apply the rules when it is convenient for you to apply the rules, then you actually don't have any rules in place. Um, so I'm just looking into my notes right now, and I have here don't lean in a direction, just call what you see. So think about how when we see the final, when we see March Madness and those college games, to me they come across as very organic, similar to the international play. When I see international play, it comes across as more organic. Now I'm not saying that it's entirely pure. I'm sure there are there is some control, there are some measures in place, but it's not to the point with the NBA where it is so obviously contained and controlled. And here, just I keep pointing back to this because now this is the 2025-2026 season. We have as much possible coverage as you can have. There are clips being shared. You've got the recordings of the games. They're streamed on all sorts of different platforms. You have people who are betting on games. You have fantasy sports. There's so much attention that is going into the games. This was the first game of the season on full display, and this happens. So this is the referees not just organically calling what they see. Don't lean in a direction. So don't have a superstar call. We don't need superstar calls, right? If a superstar is a superstar, then they'll be fine on their own. But otherwise, we shouldn't be giving calls to certain players over other certain players. Just for example, it shouldn't be that the Lakers get more free throws than everyone else. And that came out, what was it, 2 years ago or a year ago? I don't even know how long that's been going on, but that statistic came out and it spoke volumes. And that's in the numbers, right? You can't get away from the numbers, especially when they're in when you look at the aggregate and you look at, oh, the Lakers just so happen to get more free throw attempts than every other team in the league. Um, so no superstar calls, no favorite teams. Don't exert control over the game. Just let the game shape, let the game unfold as it does. And whatever's there, that's what you call. You don't look for anything to call. You just need to be set. And this is another NBA problem: is they're not set. So they don't have rules in place. They're constantly tinkering. And we saw the NBA also lie. This brings to mind another lie where the NBA, I think it was last season, they decided that they were going to officiate differently because it was so problematic. Where you had the players that were just trying to draw fouls, and so what happened is they suddenly shifted the way they called, which was for the better. By the way, it was one of the better NBA moves. But there you have a league that is deciding how it's going to call the games and it isn't quite sure, and then it determines, well, this actually is bad for the game, so now we're going to control it this way. And initially the NBA denied that this was ever the case, but then it came out a few months later, I believe, where Adam Silver admitted that they did change the officiating. But it was obvious, even if they hadn't admitted it, all we had to do is look at the numbers, and the numbers made it very clear that the NBA was officiated differently. And so my point is that you need to have a standard set. We need to have rules in place, and we don't. The rules don't. They shouldn't be up in the air. The rules should be constant, and we apply the rules. We do our best to apply them the same way every time, every game, every player. But that's not what we see with the NBA. What we see is the game being shaped inorganically. And it makes me think back to I wasn't, when I watched the games and I'd actually believed in the games. Like I believed that the games were genuinely unfolding as they would unfold. And there was a referee named Dick Bavetta. And he was, I think, one of the ultimate referees of the NBA. And side story, when you hear about the NBA referees, what I remember and what I'm sure still comes up is you'll have the NBA's network, whoever their current network is. You'll have the broadcast team, and you will have the play-by-play guy, not yeah, the play-by-play guy, and he'll say that X referee is the best in the business, or this is another referee is at the top, and they always say this despite the fact that one, the referees usually are not usually, but there are referees that are absolutely horrible and make horrible calls. But then two, if you're going to say that X referee is the best, okay, well then tell me who is the worst, because we know there are a lot of bad referees. But this is where we have the narration. We have the narrating of what's going on, and part of the narration is the broadcast team telling us what to think. And when looking back at the NBA, and you would have these wild swings in the games, and what would happen is if a team would get up too much, you'd start seeing these foul calls. And then what happens would be the team that was leading, which has these, which were getting bad foul calls against the team, then they would start complaining and they would be frustrated, and then they would get a technical foul, and that would add to the comeback, and then you'd have the crowd getting into it. But there, and then the team, the broadcast team, would start saying, "Well, you can't get emotional about this, and you're focused on the referees." Well, yeah, I'm focused on the referees because the referees are giving away the game. They're giving away our lead, and it's not us losing it. It's the referees deciding that they're going to take this back and they're going to make this a close game, which it shouldn't be a close game. But that's what we saw a lot. And I mean, this is all generally speaking, but I remember this distinctly happening in many games, especially playoff games, where you'd have one team, they'd be ahead, and then the other team would start to steadily come back right in time, and they would do so with the help of the referees, because we know the referees can dramatically shape the game and alter the outcome to a large extent. And so we saw the referees coming in and controlling the game, and it goes right back to this: the referees controlled the game. And it doesn't have to be about one team winning or another. It can be about trying to make the game seemingly to the NBA more entertaining. So we have a closer game. We don't have a blowout. We don't want that blowout. People are going to stop watching. That's bad for ratings. And so we have a controlled game. And here we saw that, and you can't get away from it. It's right there on the film. There is no escaping that. And to say that you missed the foul call, you can't, it's not, you can't do it. You're looking right there. And we know if they had a foul to call, that it would have been called. Can you imagine in this situation if the Rockets were down one and they got the defensive stop and the player got the rebound and the referees said that they didn't see the foul call? I can't. You have to think about it that way too, because that makes it all the more ridiculous when you have referees that are watching and they know that that the team will call a timeout and they're not going to grant the timeout. Usually it's not like I can't think of a time it's been this blatant. And I think that's why this is so significant. It's not this blatant. Like there's usually some way around this. So there's some way that they could argue, let's say it's a foul call, that the foul was actually a foul. Even if it's ridiculous, they can potentially argue that. Here, there's no arguing it because you're looking right at him. You are looking right at him calling a timeout, and not only calling a timeout. So it'd be different if he just called it momentarily and realized his mistake, but he repeatedly calls the timeout, and it's obvious to everyone on the Thunder, and then it's even obvious to Alpi Shengun, who tries to get him to stop. Um, let's go back to my notes here. I only have a few more notes. So this, I made mention of this the other day. Think about the Olympics. Think about international play when you have this team of NBA. Some are superstars, some are stars, some are really good role players. Now the dream team has evolved to where they're not so focused on getting every last star, and it's about having a more complete team. But think about when you have the NBA that sends this team on paper that should be dominating every game and winning by large margins. They send this team over, and the team has difficulty with other teams representing other countries who maybe have one superstar and a few NBA role players. That team is extremely competitive with this team where, on paper, if we looked at the two, we would think, well, this team has no chance because they don't have all of these stars. But when the stars go into the Olympics and we have an organic environment and they're the referees aren't there to shape the game, we see the games come out, the outcomes be dramatically different. And it doesn't have to mean that the that Team USA loses. It just means that we have these very competitive games where it's like, how is this team of all stars with complementary star role players really not pulling away from a team that maybe has one star on their team and then some other nice complementary players? How is it that Team USA can't pull this together and really just come away with a lopsided win? Um, and so that's one thing I noticed. I talked about this also recently with the competition, with the international competition, is this: we have a cognitive dissonance where we're looking at this and we're looking at a team of star players, but we're not reconcile we're unable to reconcile the fact that this team of stars that on paper should be nowhere close to this other team, they're a lot closer than we thought. And so then the excuses come in. Well, this game is everything to them, and to Team USA, it's just one game. Or this team is more cohesive. They've played together for years, and Team USA just came together. But it's like, if I follow the NBA storyline, I've been led to believe that this collection of talent from the NBA should be more than enough to dismiss some of these lesser talented teams, but that's not the case. Why is it not the case? Well, my position is that the the NBA is not there to control for the stars. So think about when you would have James Harden jumping into players and falling down and then getting foul calls. And that's an example of control, because now we can look, and every time he gives us something to go on, now we can grant him points. So now we can prop up James Harden. And I'm not saying that James Harden isn't a star, but what I am saying is that the referees would help certain star players come across as better than they were, because they would give them these gifted points and make it tougher to defend against them. It's really hard as a defender if you know you're going to get a foul call. If this anything happens to this player, it's going to change the way you play defense. So you don't have this happening in international play, and that is why the Team USA is much more competitive with other teams of lesser talent than you think it would be on paper. Let's see here. Let's just end with I have here my last notes: favoring larger market teams. So we've seen this, of course, the Lakers being the number one team that's favored. Opens up for conspiracy theories, which conspiracy theories are often dismissed on, especially on more mainstream podcasts. They talk around them or they don't really address them. And it's like, why not? Why not? You know, you have this happens, you have other events, and that's not all about the on court, but you see this, and how does it not give rise to conspiracy theories? You have to this leads to any type of rational discussion is going to ask, now, how come this player didn't have their timeout granted when they were repeatedly indicating verbally and physically that they wanted a timeout, and the referees are both right there, they're staring at him, and then we have the last seconds in the game. So this leads from here, right? We can plainly see this. So from here, this just leads to more questions. Well, then it's like, now if you're going to do this, what else won't you do? Would you be willing to uh, grant the number one pick in the draft if if a team trades its franchise player so that it can enrich our flagship team in Los Angeles, one of the largest markets in the NBA? And then you also have other things that come up, other things that have come up from NBA players. Let's just take a recent one from Shaquille O'Neal when discussing his draft, whether who would draft him, where he wanted to go, and David Stern asking him whether he wanted to play at a city with cold or hot weather, something to that effect. All of these stories, when you start to think back at them and you start to extract them from the larger picture, it starts to become very, very telling. And then so I have the last thing I have here is a legitimate sport can be entertainment, but this is sports entertainment. So what the NBA desperately needs is legitimacy. And if they do this, ultimately the product will be better than it would be with them trying to control everything. So they want to have it to where we have more exciting outcomes. It's better off. It's going to be. It will ultimately be better if the outcomes are just real, if they're just natural, if they happen, if we have more parity in the league. This is part of the problem. Is I think the NBA would be more. We'd see more unpredictability, which is much better for the fans and the league and entertainment and viewership if we have unpredictability. But because it's already largely to a large extent known who the stronger teams are going to be, and I think what plays into this is the element of control that the NBA has over the product on the court. What should happen is whatever transpires on the court happens, and the referees try to call it as best they can. Mistakes by the referees are completely fine. I have no problem with that. What I have a problem with is when there are attempts at controlling the game. And this could simply be through a superstar call. Ask yourself, how much sense does a superstar call make? Why should LeBron James get better foul calls than anybody else? Lou Dort. Why does LeBron get better? Why does he get more favorable calls? Why does James Harden get a call because he fell down on a three? Why does Shea Gilgis Alexander get a call because he elbows somebody? Right? Would Corey Joseph get that same call? And so that's what should be the case. Let the stars rise to the top on their own. Don't don't try to hold them. Don't try to keep them at a certain level. Let them be at that level by themselves. Yes, they might not be as spectacular, but at least then it will be real and authentic. And so what comes across is we don't have an authentic league. What we have is a controlled league, an inorganic league, and the league needs. If it's organic, it's going to come out so much better. It's going to come out. We're going to have more. We're going to have a more. We're going to have a level playing field if it was actually level. But then we'll have authenticity. We'll have real outcomes, more unpredictability, and that's what. If you want viewership, you have to make it so that we don't know exactly what's going to happen. And when I say we don't know, I'm not referring to whether or not a player is going to sit out. I'm stating where we don't know the outcomes. It's not largely predictable, and so we could see an upset on any given night. Um, this doesn't completely upend everything in the league, but it does change the way things play out. And right now, the way things play out is largely controlled. And the first game of the season gave us a prime example of this. And the NBA desperately needs to work on their integrity. But as has been talked about by Bill Simmons and Charles Barkley, that was a really good podcast. The NBA received a very large media rights deal, so it may not protecting the product, working on integrity may not be the primary. It's not the primary concern right now, but maybe it will be if they start to look at this and they also start to realize, like, look, fans aren't buying into the legitimacy of this. They've seen too much. And the way the NBA can move this back, right, swing this back the other way, is to start just letting things unfold as they may, like they did when they changed the way when they changed how they called the game and they started calling less fouls. That was great. More of that. Add more of that in. Go all the way to legitimacy. The league's going to be much better, and that's going to increase if you improve the product. The focus on the product. Don't focus on the playing games. Don't focus in on the All-Star game. Focus on improving the product. And from there, everything else is going to get better. But you have a weak product, and you really shouldn't expand. So expansion into Europe or just adding another team to the NBA or two teams, you shouldn't expand when you have fundamental problems with the existing product. Because if you build on that, it's only going to compound the problem. But what you can do is improve the existing product and don't engage in gimmicks. Don't try to swing things like we've seen the foul calls. Don't establish a standard that you're working from and make it a solid foundation. Truly work on the referees and not in a way that where you can count on the referee to come through for you. Work on the referees in the sense that we want the referees to have a high percentage accuracy of calls. And even we've even seen games where the referees go and review the call and they still get it wrong. When it's right there, everybody's focused in on the review and watching the replay over and over again, they still get it wrong. This is why this is a big, big reason why the NBA has so many problems, but these problems can slowly start to dissolve if the NBA works on its product, and a big part of that is going to be working on its integrity and having genuine organic games and letting them stay genuine and organic, and don't try to tamper with the results. Just accept whatever is.